Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have 2,000 points of the Iconoclast Lucarius versus the Blood Angels. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
Alright, so I am playing Blood Angels today. I have 1,977 points of Blood Angels, 1 CP left over, and it is an Ark of Omens detachment as well as a patrol detachment because of characters. So essentially what happens is, so for my warlord, not you, is my Death Company captain. So the overall idea of my army is just really fast, hard hitting, get in there and applying buffs. My Death Company captain, however, is a beatstick. So he has a Thunder Hammer and Inferno Pistol, but he has the relic weapon Hammer of Ball, which has no negatives to hit and has 3 damage. And so I gave him the Warlord trait Gift of Foresight, and so he can reroll 1 hit, wound, and roll and saving throw per turn. And so he's just a beatstick, giving a few hit buffs to nearby enemies. Death Company Lieutenant. Now he's an interesting one. He has a jetpack. It's just I couldn't find a model that has a Thunder Hammer and a jetpack at the same time. That's like a lieutenant stuff. But essentially, apart from giving rerolls to wound, he has the relic Icon of the Angel, which all Blood Angel units within 6 inches of him can reroll charges. Since I'm a melee army, that's very important. And so that's his job. And I have Astorath the Grim, which is a chaplain, which has good armor, good weapon, 3 damage, hitting on strength 6. And so he has 4 abilities, apart from being tough to kill. He has Litany of Hate, Canticle of Hate, his Mantra of Strength, but he has Massive Doom, which basically can give me +1 to hit from my Death Company. You can also possibly on a 6 give him a 4-up invuln and +1 to hit, or kill 1 and +1 to hit. So bit of iffy there, but he is a priest and he can fly. This is a highly mobile group. And a sanguinary priest. This one also has a jetpack, but I couldn't find a model with it. And he is, well, he's just an actual apothecary that flies with selfless healer and a chief apothecary. So he has a warlord trait for that. So he's just for healing, but he's the only one who's not really Death Company. And I wanted to try the Sanguinor because the Sanguinor has a very interesting ability where if he's in deep strike and my guys are in combat at the end of the heroic intervention step on my opponent's turn, he can just come in from deep strike in combat. So I thought that was cool and I want to try it. So let's see if that happens. Then for troops, so for the Ark of Omens, I have a unit of infiltrators, which I can never figure out how to recolor. And these guys, they're just doing their job, holding objectives and stuff. Helix Gauntlet, of course. And then in the patrol detachment, I have 2 units of scouts who are also doing the heavy lifting, and they all have camo cloaks. And so they're very cheap scouts. 60 points to infiltrators, 60. Much weaker and stuff, but I'll just hide them. And they all have shotguns, even though the sergeant doesn't look like it has, and he has a shotgun. Now on to elites, which is the elite focus from Ark of Omens. 2 units of Death Company, which all have the same stuff. And so essentially, they have a mix of Astartes Change Swords, Thunder Hammers, Power Fists, and the Power Fist guys have Infernal Pistols and jetpacks and such. So 2 units of that. Then I have 1 unit of Vanguard Veterans. These guys, essentially, yeah, they're just tough. They're basically a 2-up, 4-up, and with lightning claws. These guys are high damage. The only thing that's of note is that the sergeant has a relic blade and an inferno pistol. He's the only one who has something different. And then 2 units of sanguinary guard for deep striking. So they have Carmine Axe and Power Fists. And so and that's about it. And yeah, just highly mobile, trying to flank, trying to get into grips as fast as possible and beat my opponent down. They may be Titans and stuff, but Blood Angels have +1 to wound on their first turn of combat and +1 attack in the Assault Doctrine. So yeah, and that is my 2,000 points of Blood Angels.
Alright you guys, so I have 2,000 points of Chaos Knights with the Iconoclast Household Lucarius. So they have 2 major types. One is really kind of melee focused, and the other one is not. They just get like random buffs. So I was like, that's too many things for me to remember at a time for first time playing these guys. So I'm just gonna go with the Iconoclast, just +1 attack and AP, real simple. So what that did mean though was that it was like, okay, well that means that I kind of need to have some kind of melee something. And so let's look at what I got. So I know from my time with Imperial Knights that you don't want just all of the big boys, you want a mix of the tinier guys. So I chose 2 of the big boys and 3 separate, because I actually have a lot of these War Dogs variants. So I was like, let me try a mix. So I started with the War Dog Stalkers. And because I had some extra points, the one on the right here actually has the cursed rune of Zinch, cursed rune of fate, which basically, if he gets shot at on a 6 for his save, it flicks back a mortal wound up to 6. I don't know if that'll actually ever come into play. But if he kills 5 models, he gets a 4-up invuln save, or 5 wounds worth. But so these guys are really straightforward. They have a chainsaw and a chain cannon and a claw and a really weak missile launcher. So they're just kind of like mid-range shooty guys with a melee claw. And then into the middle, I have these huntsman guys that are more Melta-y, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. So they just have really high damage guns and like a chain sword thing, so they can kind of move around and kind of poke at some stuff with heavy damage. And then if they need to, they have their chain swords, but the goal isn't for them themselves to be in combat. But then I have these carnivore squads right here. Now one of them actually has a corn thing, the Throne Mechanicum of Skulls, which gives him an additional +1 attack and AP, I think, or damage or something. I'll look at it later. But anyway, so these guys have just basically all melee except for 1 missile launcher, so that way they're not entirely useless when they're not in melee. And so these guys will kind of partner around the Knight Rampager, which is directly behind them. Now he is basically the bigger version of these guys. He's got a lot of stuff melee-wise. So he's got a big boy claw, a big sword, and he has a heavy stubber, which is, you know, I don't want to say it's useless, but it's useless. I also gave him a warlord trait and a corn thing. So he has a relic as well. So his warlord trait, strike first, strike often. Basically, if he's in melee, he's swinging first. And then his collar of infernal brass basically reduces psychic stuff, I believe. And then his relic does some other stuff. It's basically like a regional buff or debuff, I believe. And so he's going to be kind of a heavy melee, so hopefully pulling on that corn aspect and the iconoclast, so he should have quite a few attacks, I'm hoping. But they are always more fragile than they seem, so we'll see what happens. And then my warlord is my Knight Tyrant. And so he has both a warlord trait and a relic. So his relic basically adds 1 strength and 2 damage to his, where is it? Twin Demon Breath Melt-A-Gun. So that's going to be just super lethal. I think, hopefully. And then he has the Harbinger of Scrap Code, which is a warlord trait, which basically targets vehicles. So now that I know he has no vehicles, it's kind of useless, but if he had like dreadnoughts or stuff, that would have been pretty useful. And yeah, so he's just a big shooting platform with feet. And yeah, so that's 2,000 points. Kind of a mix, a little bit of shooting, but a good bit of melee as well. Now I figured have 1 giant gun platform to kind of balance between things, I guess. I don't know. I've never really played them before, so I'm gonna kind of feel it out and see what happens. And that's my 2,000 points.
Alright, so the mission today is Tide of Conviction. It's Control 2, Control 3, Control More. We get 2 victory points at the end of each of our turns if we control one or more objectives in our opponent's territory, which is the objectives right outside the line, essentially. And at the end of the turn, we gain 3 victory points for each one we control at the end of the game. And at the start of the mission, or at the start of each turn, roll a d6. If you don't control your home objective on a 1, 2, 3, you do not get your Battleforge CP. And that is the mission. Alright, so for Secondaries for the Blood Angels, I have behind enemy lines, bring it down, and grind them down. This is the best I could think of. Bring it down is obvious. Behind enemy lines, I'm kind of built for it. Grind them down. I have very few units, so does he, so I think I might be able to match it. And yeah, and that's all of my objectives.
So mine are all from the Chaos Knights thing. One of them is, so Ruthless Tyranny is controlling half or more of the objective markers, and then I would get 1 point or 2 point depending on if half or all of them are within my, dread range. So we'll see, it's melee focus, so I might be able to get them all on that. We'll see. And then Storm of Darkness is an objective thing that takes place at the end of my morale phase, and then ends at my next, the end of my psychic, or the beginning of my psychic phase. So it's kind of a weird battle round time frame, but anyway, and so I can do it once on one objective at a time, and so I basically curse it, essentially. And so that one's kind of easy to do initially. It'll get harder to do as the game goes on, but we'll see what I can pull from that. And then Path of Destruction is the last one, which is just varying layers of, not grind them down, but I'm getting kill points for different kind of things. So killing something while my model was wholly within my deployment zone, or while one of my models was in neither player's zones, so in no man's land, and then while a Chaos Knight was wholly within my opponent's deployment zone, so basically just killing stuff at different points of the map. So it, I guess it makes sense from the name, Path of Destruction. But anyway, so I don't know how much of that I'll be able to pull off, but I figured I'd give it a go. Why not?
Alright, so for deployment, we had a roll-off. I won. I had my opponent deploy first because I wanted to know where the majority of his power is, because I need to have a target to lock onto, and it's better I use chaff. So for me, I was just putting out units to try to bait out his units to see where they are so I could counter them. So scouts went out first, then infiltrators on the right. So scouts are actually elites, not troops, so they can't sticky objectives. And so the infiltrators went to the one that I'll be able to keep but retreat from, and one of my scouts went and took their objective right in front, so I'll be getting those victory points very quickly if I get first turn. And then scouts on the back end, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. Yeah, that's basically my idea, was to counter his stuff, bait out his stuff, and counter them. And so he put a good portion of his guys on the left side, so I countered with my Death Company on there, and my veterans and apothecary on the right to counter. And that was my entire deployment and ideas.
Yeah, so I actually started off by hiding my units as per usual. Then I realized he has no shooting. At least none that matters. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing that for. But most of it was already done by that point, so I was like, well, okay, whatever. But essentially, because my units are so big, I actually have to be mindful of where they're placed. Not because of his access or anything like that, but because literally they wouldn't fit through the buildings. So originally my Rampager was going to go behind the building that my Tyrant is in, but then he wouldn't be able to actually come out the side of it where my War Dog Carnivores are, because he literally would not fit. And so there's only 2 places that they would actually fit through between the buildings, and one of them they have to be sideways for. So that was really my big consideration. Okay, where can my guys fit through? Where can they actually move through? And then it's basically secondaries from there, because my game is shooting and then killing things. So I was like, okay, well, my secondaries, I need to do this, do that. And so that's kind of where all my war dogs were placed with secondaries in mind. But yeah, so it wasn't so much trying to balance and counter him because his units are super mobile, way more mobile than mine, I think. So I wasn't really worried about that. He's going to do what he's going to do. I was just like, okay, what do I need to try and get before they all die? And so that was how I ended up setting up. Except for the ones behind the giant tentacle. I was just trying to hide them again before I realized I didn't need to. And yeah, and that was my setup.
Alright then, so go first, go second. Well, I'll start this one off. If I go first, I get a bunch of victory points, and I set up for turn 2 charges with a lot of defense to weather the storm, essentially. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And, yeah, that's it. If I go second, I maybe take some hits, but you move out, and then I might be able to countercharge you turn 1, my turn 1. Yeah, that's pretty much all I see. This is right at this point. This game with so few units and stuff. This is a chess match right here, right now. So be very careful. The game will be won or lost in the movement phase, and some probably crappy dice rolls. So that's what I think. What about you?
I think because yeah, what do I think? I think I need to go first. Because it'll give me a little bit more movement and mobility. It'll give me a small round of shooting before anything else happens. Won't be a lot of shooting because most of your stuff is hidden or only visible to stuff with garbage shooting. Yeah, so I think going first would be better. I don't think you could necessarily do a first turn charge. Maybe you could, I guess with these scouts you could if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but yeah, so I don't know if it 100% matters that I go first. Going second might points-wise help me a little bit in the fact that at the end of the game, I would still be able to get them by the end of my turn. But I think I want to go first because it would just give me a little more. Well, I don't know actually. Maybe going second wouldn't be the worst. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think you can charge me. So because your army is essentially melee, you don't have any shooting. So maybe going second isn't too bad because then I'll have stuff to actually shoot at. Yeah, maybe, yeah. I go second. I think that's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay. So. 6.
Okay.
Oh, you got your wish.
I did.
Blood Angels.
Let's see if it was worth it.
Yeah. Blood Angels turn 1. Alright. So for pre-battle, I spent 2 CP to have one of my Death Company get a free 12-inch move before battle. And so, yeah, it's pretty convenient. Alright, so time for some chess movements. So essentially, a lot happened. So first, on the right, so my infiltrators ran off the objective. Since they're troops, it's sticky, so it is in my possession either way. So I want to rotate them around. So they ran to an extraction spire to give them light cover and stuff if it's in the way. The Vanguard veterans on the right ran and got in there safe from the War Dog Stalker Squadron, and the Sanguinary Priest ran behind them. I put the Vanguard veterans sort of in a line in case the Sanguinary Priest would fall behind a little bit, and so to protect it from shooting, just in case, and it's fine. Then apart from that, my scouts on the bottom moved up to go into the other objective there. I do control all that I need, and then some, and so the scouts on top are still just sitting there in cover, so they basically have 2-up armor saves while they're in there because they're camo cloaks, so they have a 4-up, and their light cover turns to 3-up, their camo cloak turns that to a 2-up. So they're in there, they're irritating, and they'll be in the way. Apart from that, then My blue Death Company ran. They got a good distance. They moved up. Astorath moved up. My Death Company Lieutenant moved up. Death Company Captain moved up. All running and stuff. All doing that. I didn't record it because I somehow forgot to do it. But I had my Green Company, Green Death Company Marines move up, and they took the top left objective. So now I have all the objectives except for 2 right now. Well, not that it matters, but yeah. Alright, so for the shooting phase, the Green Squad of Death Company Marines mag dumped the War Dog that was right in front of them because Infernal Pistols, which apparently for some reason are in the back. Doggone it. So 8 bolt pistol shot did 1 damage, and then 2 Infernal Pistols. I have 2 Power Fists in each squad, and the Power Fists have Infernal Pistols. They shot their Infernal Pistols, 1 hit, 1 wounded. He wasn't able to save it with a 5-up, and I did 5 damage to him. So he's taking quite a good beating, and that was the shooting phase. Alright, for the charge phase, Green Squad multi-charges both 1 Power Fist and 3 Chain Swords go to the right, and everything else goes on to the left. Alright, so for the fight phase, going through this, I discovered I had 3 Power Fists. I forgot that I put a 3rd Power Fist, so I had an extra Infernal Pistol. But, oh well. And so I had 2 Chain Swords and 2 Power Fists swing into the War Dog on the right, and they successfully killed it. Now, because I charge Blood Angels, I get +1 to wound on the turn I charge, and so I was able to do a lot of good. And then on the left side, a bunch of Chain Swords swung. They would have wounded on 4s, and then I rolled tons of 1s and 2s. And then the rest of my swings got in. The War Dog survived. He has 3 wounds left. Thunderhammers did a good deal. Power Fist did some good deals. But it wasn't enough. He survived. And just barely, by the way. He made one of the Thunderhammer saves, and that saved him. And then he swung back, and he killed one of my Death Company. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, behind enemy lines, not yet. Bring it down, I killed one, so 2 points for that vehicle. Grind them down, I got 1 mark on that, so we'll see at the end of my opponent's turn if I can get 3 points from there. And I got Tidy Convictions, thanks to the little scout squad at the beginning. And it was a very good first strike, but we'll see what happens next.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, it was pretty simple. My Night Rampager cozied up to the Death Marines. My War Dog Stalker's in the middle. 1 moved out onto the objective, so he's objective secured and counts as 5, so now it's a tied objective until those guys die, and then he'll hold the objective. Then the War Dog Stalker in the back just kind of turned around because he can see the Death Company, the blue ones, as can the Night Tyrant. And then the green guys basically snuck around because they have a really nice angle on these Vanguard vets over here, and so they're going to see what they can do with their like 4 shots of melted weapons. I guess technically they could maybe charge. It's a long charge. But yeah, so that was my turn in movement. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, I started with my Night Rampager because his gun is essentially useless and it buys me time to think about what I actually want to do. So I didn't want him to shoot at the blue squad because they only really had like 1 or 2 guys that were visible. So if for whatever reason he actually ended up doing something, I didn't want it to inhibit the big guy who actually needs to do stuff. He shot at the orange scouts on the objective and he did nothing, so shock surprise. Then I went and I shot with the red War Dog Stalker on the objective as well, and he was able to kill 3 of the scouts with his shooting, so that was that. And then the green War Dog Huntsman also shot at, well, I say both of them, shot at the red Vanguard vets on the side, and they were able to kill 1 guy. Some of it was due to bad rolling, but obviously they have their storm shield, so they have a 4-up invuln, so that helped them there. And then after that, then my Night Tyrant shot at his blue guys, and initially had some kind of pathetic results, but he ended up killing 6 of them. His volcano lance particularly killed 3, so he just incinerated them because it was d6 plus 8 wounds, and so I rolled 2 6s and a 2, so his feel no pain would not help him there. So, but yeah, so he killed about half that squad, or just over half, so that was nice. And that was really the entire shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so my red War Dog Stalker in the middle charged his scouts. He rolled a 9. He only needed like 3 inches. So he got into the scouts. Hopefully he will kill them. Then my green War Dog Huntsman in the front tried to charge his red Vanguard vets, because, I don't know, at this point, either I charge them or they charge me. But he failed. I used a command point to try and re-roll it, and he failed again. I rolled like a 2, and then I rolled like a 5. So he did not get it. And then my Knight Rampager charged his Green Death Company squad. He only needed like a 1, and I rolled like a 5, so he was very much in. And then after the charge phase in the heroic intervention, his Sanguinor guy showed up in that combat. So even though it's the first battle round, I don't think that actually matters for his rules. So he's in, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, if anyone wants clarification, we read it, and so it says at the end of my opponent's heroic intervention step in their turn. So, I mean, that's literally it. So, and yeah.
Alright, you guys, so I started off with my War Dog because he had no way to interrupt or anything like that. So he had 5 or 6 attacks? 5 attacks. 5 attacks. And he swung and he killed the 2 scouts.
He only wounded 3 times, though, so you were just very close to screwing up.
Yeah, but the AP saw him through. He only needed 2 to go through, so anyway. And then the Knight Rampager swung, and so because I am an Iconoclast household, he got an additional attack. And because he has one of the Khorne upgrade things, the Collar of Infernal Brass, which for the most part will be useless for this game, except for the additional attack that it gave him. Additional attack and actually +1 to hit. Or not +1 to hit, an additional weapon skill, I believe. Yeah, so he has that too. Anyway, so I used his Chain Sword Sweep attack, which multiplies his attacks by 3, so it went from 7 to 21. And then because he charged, he had an additional AP. So it was, I think 13 wounds went through at AP 4 and 2 damage. So he actually wiped the Death Company squad out. And then his Sanguinor actually swung back.
So how I worked, so basically it came down to this. So I could swing and do a good amount of damage to the Knight Rampager because it's the first turn of the charge for him and stuff. So I'll get +1 to wound. But the thing is, though, his War Dog could probably kill him easy. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to make the safe play. So I threw everything at the War Dog to kill it. And so now it's sort of tied against the Knight Rampager. So we'll see how this game goes. But yeah, so that's what I did. Killed the Rampager, or no, his little War Dog there with the Sanguinor. And yeah, and that was the fight phase.
Alright, you guys, so obviously primaries don't come in this turn. Tide of Conviction, though, obviously I'm not as mobile as he is, but also I couldn't afford to just run up to touch his objectives. So I got 0 points Tide of Conviction. I did, however, get 1 point for Ruthless Tyranny for half of the objectives being within dread range. And then I got 0 points for Storm of Darkness because it's a battle round length objective, so hopefully it'll come through on my next turn. And then Path of Destruction, I actually got 2 points for killing a unit in No Man's Land and my deployment zone. And yeah, so that was it. So I got essentially 3 points this turn. So not great, but overall, I think the turn went okay-ish. And that was my points.
All right, so for the command phase, Astaroth the Grim did Canticles of Hate or Litany of Hate, and then he did his special ability like Death Match something. Basically, where it's a thing. I select a Death Company and I roll a d6 to see what it does. It can give him +1 to hit, a bunch of bonuses like that, but it can also kill one if I roll a 1, and I rolled a 1, so I get +1 to hit and 1 dies. So that happened. That sucks. Then some shuffling happened. So my infiltrators failed to run, so I spent a CP to re-roll that, and they made it onto the back objective there, or my home objective. My scouts that moved up touched the objective there, so I now have a lot of objectives. I still have sticky objective on the bottom right objective. And then I decided that because that War Dog squad killed literally nothing, I was like, you know what? I will ignore them because they can't do jack against me, so I'm going to go and be annoying and take charge his top left objective and take that War Dog out and get some more points for controlling the objective. And and the Secondary Priest moved him, and I forgot to do that. He brings back one Vanguard veteran with his ability. And then and then my Death Company Marines moved up against the Night Rampager on the top left, along with the entire squad, all the characters. So we'll see if that was a good idea or a bad idea, because he has always fight first, but I have a few tricks up my sleeve. Maybe. And then the Sanguinary Guard came in, and I was fussing over where to put them, but I decided, you know what, screw it, go for the home objective. And that was my movement phase. Alright, charge phase. I realized that I could not shoot anything, as everyone had Inferno pistols, and so the Sanguinary Guard were out of range, and his Night Rampager was in combat. So, oops. Alright, charges first. The Vanguard vets charge the War Dog on there. I have claimed the objective, and I am going to get the Tide of Conviction. And then my Sanguinary Priest charged in 2. I'm not expecting him to fight or anything, but it's mostly because so he can pile in and consolidate after the fact. And the Sanguinary Guard, both of them made their 9-inch charges. Surprisingly, I didn't have to spend a reroll point for that. Then up top, Death Company Marines charged, made it in. Lieutenant made it in. Astaroth made it in. Death Company Captain made it in. And that was the charge phase. Alright, so for the fight phase, first, I go with my Death Company Captain. He has a beat stick, and I'm hoping to bracket the thing, and he gets all these attacks. He has Litany of Hate helping him to reroll, and he gets to reroll 1 wound. Lieutenant helps him, and he does like 12 damage to the Night Rampager because his Thunderhammer is a relic one that does 3 damage at -3, and doesn't have any negatives to hit, so he did really well. And then my opponent's Night Rampager has always strike first, so he got to go right afterwards, and he killed my lieutenant and my entire Death Company squad. So, that was a waste. And my Death Company Captain, I had him do the thing where he gets a 3-up invulnerable save for Death Vision. I thought he was going to be swung back at, but no. And then, live and learn. And then I forgot my opponent can interrupt, and so he did. And then with his War Dog, he squished my Sanguinary Priest. And in return, my Vanguard veterans squished his War Dog. I now took that spot, and I'm getting 2 victory points for that place. Then up top, my Sanguinary Guard all swung on his War Dog and completely killed it. Piled in a little bit, but not towards the full Night Tyrant. The Astaroth also swung against the Night Rampager, did some damage, and then the Sanguinor finished off by almost killing it. Almost. Sadly, the Night Rampager has 2 wounds left. That's disappointing. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, I controlled 2 at the beginning, so I got 4 points there. I ended the turn with one of his back objective thingies, so I got Tide of Conviction. I took his home objective, so that's gonna maybe stop him from getting CP. I got behind enemy lines full points for the turn. I got 4 points for bring it down because I killed 2 of his war dogs. I got 2 things for grind him down, but he has 3, so I have to lose nothing and kill something this turn, or this upcoming turn. And yeah, and that is the points.
Yes, so, hello, welcome. What I did for this movement phase is my 2 green war dog huntsmans. The front one ran, so he's actually able to go sit on that objective in his territory, so now I can start getting those points. The other one did not run, but has clear line of sight to his purple sanguinary guards, and I think technically his vanguard vets, but I don't know if that's worth shooting at. And then my Knight Tyrant basically just turned around and scooted back just a hair. And then my Knight Rampager actually fell back, but he fell back past them. So he's only just next to Astorath and the Death Company Captain. And then... that was actually it, because that's all that I have left. So that was my movement phase, you guys. Alright, you guys, so for the shooting phase, the green War Dog Huntsman shot at his purple, who are they? Sanguinary Guard. And he missed. He rolled double ones, so that was garbage. But then the Knight Titan shot, and he actually killed both of the squads. So I split his guns, the Demon Breath Melta guns and the Desecrator Cannon, to the purple squad, and then the Ectoplasma Decimator and the Volcano Lance at the yellow squad. And he was able to polish both of them off. The purple was a little close, but we hadn't even gotten to the Volcano Lance on the yellow squad. But so he got both of those squads. He also has fulfilled his worthy offering for his Mirror of Fates thing. So that's also something. It's not a huge something, but it's something. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so essentially my Knight Rampager basically just turned around and charged his Astorath and Death Company Captain, because he only has an 8-inch movement. He can't get away from them. So he might as well try and kill them. I was able to at least take out the Sanguinor from the equation. Of course, then he'll just charge in his turn, so it won't really matter long term. But hopefully he'll be able to take out at least one, if not both of them, in the meantime. And that was my charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the combat phase, my Knight Rampager, or not Knight, oh yeah, he's a Knight, okay, Knight Rampager, charged obviously Astorath and his captain, and so I used his Claw Sweep, and I split the attacks evenly, and so he smushed the captain.
Yeah, because he couldn't roll a 4 up to save his life. Yeah,
but Astorath actually passed all of them except for one. So he actually took that to the face. But so he has 2 wounds left, but then he swung back and he did more damage than he needed. And then my guy didn't explode, and I didn't have the points to use the explosion stratagem that the Chaos Knights have. So that was the fight phase.
Yeah, and so just, I spent a CP to re-roll one of the attacks that didn't wound because I was like, I have nothing else to spend it on, and I need to make sure this thing dies. So I wasn't going to risk it, of him rolling like 7 6s or something. And so he finished it off. Yeah.
Alright, you guys, so for points, I got 2 points of Tide of Conviction because my war dogs on the right side were actually able to go and touch one of his back objectives. I got 1 point for Ruthless Tyranny because, again, half of the objectives are within dread range. Storm of Darkness did not go through, so I got nothing there. And then Path of Destruction, because all of my units that killed stuff, which killed a chunk of stuff, but still were in my deployment zone, I only get 1 point for them being in my deployment zone. And so yeah, so that was my points. Not super great, but a lot of his killing power is gone. So the question is, do I think do I think that I can make it up
No.
over the next 3 rounds, and so I have no idea.
I do. No. All right, we decided to call it there because it is impossible for my opponent to win at that point. He just doesn't have enough board control, and I, at that point, really doesn't have to fight him. My Vanguard vets would easily just slaughter the rest of the War Dogs, or at least one, and then be fighting the other one, and then the main Knight would just be walking around and stuff. He wouldn't be able to control anything, really. So I would just sit and do nothing and just run around him in circles, and I would win the game astronomically each turn, getting like full primary. So MVP, LVP. So with LVP, I have a close tie. So Death Company Lieutenant and Sanguinary Priest. So Sanguinary Priest revived one guy, then died. Death Company Lieutenant gave rerolls for 1 moment and then died. His reroll charges never came up, so LVP is going to have to be the Death Company Lieutenant. It's just like bad luck. If my opponent didn't have Always Strike First, this would be a completely different thing on that Titan guy. So he is my LVP because he had the least performance. This wasn't that anyone did bad or really failed me. It's just that like everyone did their job. Everyone did well. But he's just, yeah, he was the least performing unit, so LVP to him, Death Company Lieutenant. MVP is actually pretty difficult to decide because, let's start with the Humble Scout. Helped hold the objectives, got me 2 victory points up top, made you run around and focus on them instead of other things. Infiltrator's pretty much the same thing. These guys took an objective, made it sticky, got me a bunch of points, held the back, so these were very important for scoring and pretty much was key for a victory. Vanguard veterans. Now these guys, they killed one. They strategically moved up. They tanked a bunch of shots and meltas. They killed 1 war dog, took the front. Strategically were able to keep going around, and so these guys were strategically very important for victory. Even in the theory hammer of the after game, these guys were essentially what made it over for my opponent at that time, and they scored me technically 4 victory points in total for all their actions. Then we have my Beatstick Captain, who did 12 damage to that Knight Titan. Really good, really strong. It was surprisingly good, but he would have probably done way more damage. Actually, I think about it, he probably would have done like from 12 damage, probably 16 or yeah, probably 15 damage or 18 damage if it was the Assault Doctrine. Just sad that that had to happen that way, but yeah. And then Astrath the Grim, because he survived his saves and he was able to kill off the Night Titan. So overall, these guys were very important. They did a lot of good damage, but when I can't really decide, I go by who brings in the points. And Infiltrators, who sat and did nothing but run around, are MVP. They strategically helped me score all the points I needed, and everyone else was fighting and doing their jobs while these guys were doing the rest of the jobs. So yeah, so MVP is Infiltrators. Close second is my Beatstick Captains. Alright, what about you?
Well, MVPs actually is both of the big boys. They both did a lot. So like the Night Tyrant, he wiped out almost everything he shot at.
Yeah.
And so he did a lot there. And he probably would have just stayed alive till the end of the game had we played the whole thing out.
Yeah.
He probably would have killed almost everything you have left, but you know, points wise that wouldn't have mattered. But so that was actually really good. I know with the Imperial Knights with their big shooty guy, I didn't quite have the same kills, same wins. I don't know. He did actually really good. I was kind of worried when I was taking him because with all my time with Imperial Knights, he never really did much, the big boys. So I was a little worried, but he actually cleaned out quite a few units, so that was really cool. And then the Night Rampager obviously did a lot. He killed both squads of your Death Company guys. He killed your Smash Captain and your Lieutenant. He almost killed Astrath, but you just rolled too many of those 4-ups.
Yeah, I actually finally got saves in.
Yeah, unstatistical, but you know, what are you gonna do? And so, yeah, he also did really good. I don't know MVP wise. It might be the Night Rampager, just because of tactically, like the things that he actually did kill. They both did. I don't know.
Well, let me put you this way: if this guy was charged by everyone, he would have died.
Well, yeah, but that's why he was all the way in the back.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So
Well,
when it
I don't know, he might
comes
have
to
been
super
on the
close, when it comes to super close, I always go with whoever brought me most victory points in the game.
Neither of them really brought. Well, I guess he was on the home objective, so I guess technically he did. Yeah. So I guess it's the Night Tyrant. I'll put as my MVP. Honestly, it's super close. But we'll say Night Tyrant because he actually survived, I guess, as well. That's something. So LVPs.
Everyone I killed first.
Yeah, all 3 of them. I didn't care much for them. Maybe with Chaos Knights you can just do all big boys. Maybe that's the game.
I mean, strategically you don't want to, but yeah.
Right, because so few models. But yeah, so definitely the War Dog Huntsmans. They literally did nothing the whole game. They got me 2 points because they were basically ignored and were able to run and touch an objective. And so, but that's garbage. So definitely the LVP War Dog Huntsmans. But the other 2 honestly aren't super far behind. None of them really did much. The War Dog Stalkers, they killed 5 scouts. The Carnivores did nothing. They just died. So, yeah, not a lot of wins on the War Dog side. Now, technically, there's 2 more floating around in the Codex, so maybe those guys were the better choices. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm noticing.
This guy sucked.
Yeah. They were the least performing. They killed 1 Vanguard veteran and got you 2 victory points for getting in the back. Yeah, and that was it. Whoever killed the scouts earlier was the real MVP of the War Dogs because he's denied me 3 points for grind them down in the first turn. So
yeah. That was the stalkers.
Yeah. Alright. Well.
Yeah. So the War Dog. I don't know. I mean, maybe you have to be a lot more careful with them. I thought maybe like the Carnivores, they screened out the Night Rampager from that first turn charge, so maybe that's technically a positive. I don't know.
Alright, so for the game, for the army, so what did you think of playing Chaos Knights? This is your first time playing them.
I like them. They're a lot more aggressive than the Imperial Knights. Their lore is really sad. So it's kind of like the orcs in Lord of the Rings, where they were elves that were taken and then tortured and tainted. So same thing with the Chaos Knights, except for I think one of the households. But
yeah, one of the households had this ridiculous story that involved time travel. They were declared traitor when they were loyal, and through they were attacked by everyone. They were able to flee from their home world, and through the warp, they accidentally got sent back in time, and they were like, "Screw you, Imperium!" And so they attacked the Imperium, and it was like that's how they got labeled traitor. Catch-22 is like
looks to suck.
Yeah, clearly some Xenian stuff.
But so I thought they were really cool. The big boys did a lot of damage. So that's something. Always strike first definitely helped him out. The Night Rampager. And then their houses are more aligned. The Iconoclast ones are more aligned to combat. So that was pretty cool. They have a lot more War Dog choices. So the Imperial Knights, they have 2 of the smaller choices. They have a kind of a pseudo melee one and a kind of shooty one. And then they have a bunch of big guys. Whereas these guys have like 3 or 4 maybe of the big guys, and then a bunch of the little War Dogs. And so I enjoyed it. Yeah, I really don't know what to do with the smaller guys though. But I like the book. It was a little confusing at first because they kind of have a lot of layers of rules.
Yeah, because they have
So
so
even
few
like
models that they have to pack layer
yeah,
upon layer upon layer upon variation,
yeah. So like
variation.
even the it's not dread host. What is it? That rule that is at the beginning of the. I'm trying to find it right now. The Harbingers of Dread. That really didn't come into play in this game, but so it's an interesting rule. I wasn't quite super sure of what it was, but yeah. So I mean, they have a lot of interesting rules that they have layered onto them. Then you have obviously all of the chaos upgrades that you can do. And so that was pretty interesting. So I think they might actually be more customizable than the Imperial Knights.
Yeah, because they get like the powers of the warp and stuff.
Yeah, and then they have psychic powers, whereas the Imperial Knights have like a chaplain thing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty cool. I think they're fun to play. Their lore is really sad, but they're fun to play. I think you need to play them regularly so that way you kind of have a better feel for how to respond and deploy and kind of tactically what you want to do with them, because again the war dogs were really fragile but they have to do things, so it's like okay, well what do I bring them in for, like what are they actually trying to do?
So what I did see,
guys are more straightforward. They just, this guy punches stuff, this guy shoots stuff, so
yeah, so what I've seen, what I've noticed is that it's like damage output. These war dogs just don't have the damage output, but the big guys do.
No.
But the little guys are very important for holding objectives. And so I do know I saw like one guy, I don't remember who was a Loyal or Chaos Knights, but in a tournament, thank you War Games Live, shout out to you. But essentially his whole army basically had +2 wounds, and it really allowed his war dogs to survive initial strikes and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's the I forget which house. It's one of the iconoclast houses.
Yeah, but if you think about it, +2 wounds, I think I only just barely killed the first dogs and stuff. So like +2 wounds would have changed the game early on.
They would have still been alive.
In fact, actually, I just barely killed the guy on this objective, the war dog there. It was just like 1 or 2 wounds off, and so.
Also, because that +2 wounds, it's I forget which one of the houses it is. It's one that sounds like a disease.
It's a nerval-based one, I believe. Yeah, well.
It is.
I'm thinking about that. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about.
So many pages.
Yeah.
House Herpatrax.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So 2 wounds to War Dog class models and 4 wounds to Titanic models. Mm-hmm. So actually, if I had picked that house, this guy actually would have survived the Night Rampager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so like I'm noticing that like it's that just that couple extra wounds goes a long way, surprisingly. But but if I played these guys again, it would be mostly big guys and a few these smaller guys to just hold objectives, and the big guys would be going forward, taking shots. Unless I'm facing Tau, in which case they would come in reserve, and then I would get first turn shooting with this guy. Yeah, but as far as Blood Angels, so I mostly went with, I knew I was facing you, but like honestly, I could not envision getting any real infantry, apart from infiltrators, so I don't get sideswiped, but also to get the objectives first. And I was like, scouts. So Asterath, no, what was it? Sanguinor was in charge of my patrol detachment, and the infiltrators and the 2 scouts were from the patrol detachment, and so they were for strategic stuff. Him, because it's like I always want to add something kind of cool, and so his heroic intervention thing sounded cool, so like I wanted to try that, and it did help. It did kill the war dogs, finish them off. And then the infiltrators, like strategically very important, and the scouts, they're 60 points each for 5. Camo cloaks are free, and a sturdy shotgun, while never used, is strength 4, 2 shots at 18 inches, so pretty decent.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and so like they were strategically useful. And so for 120 points, I was able to hold 2 locations, which very important to have some guys to hold back. And yeah, and so then the other guys, the Death Company. So I went full Death Company. Asterath gives them buffs. the lieutenant gave him buffs. The Death Company captain gave him buffs. Although if I went with the thing where he does like D3+3 damage against the guy, I would have killed him, and then he wouldn't have died the next turn. And the Sanguinary Priest was, of course, with the Vanguard Vets, because these guys are a huge anti-horde, also beatstick, and super tough with the 4-up invuln save, 2-up armor save because of storm shields, and reroll to wound would easily handle every single type of enemy, especially your war dogs and stuff. So, unfortunate, I completely forgot that you could swing first, otherwise I would have gone with him and then with these guys next instead of Astorath, so I screwed that up. But overall, very mobile. They have a lot of damage, a ridiculous amount of damage. What really made it was the stratagem where I can move 12 inches at the very start. That was a big deal. That was a very big deal. Yeah. And easy good turn charges, but they didn't have any specialties or anything like that. That could have helped with charges and such. They got no bonuses, so. But overall, these Blood Angels, they're an interesting. Yeah, this was a chess game. Highly mobile. Go where I want. I'm not really bothered by anything. The Blood Angels is the jetpack army. I'm actually kind of disappointed in the whatchamacallit, whoever these guys are. Yeah, the Sanguinary Guard, just because of lack of invulnerable saves. But I gave them all Infernal Pistols. If they would have moved up the board, I would have deleted a lot. But yeah, because they're Infernal Pistols and stuff. So I can see where they're damaged, but just their armor is not the best, or it could have been better. But yeah, these guys aren't interesting, but they're kind of a one-trick pony. It's like, there's not...
Yeah, I think their big thing is just kind of like showing up and then just doing a bunch of damage.
Yeah, it's like, overall, it's like a couple of tricks, but it's a very repetitive army I see. But a lot of good characters with a lot of ridiculous damage, like 3 damage. I mean, come on, that's really good. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Alright then, GG's, an interesting game of chess. A really, really big, expensive game of chess. Alright.